All right, everyone. Well, thank you for joining us today here at the Ancients Visitor Center and Museum. My name is Amala, and I have the privilege of being able to oversee visitor services and recreation for Kansas the Ancients Visitor Center Museum and the Monument. And we are so happy today, one, because our friends group, Southwest Colorado Canyons Alliance, is here helping to promote and share this amazing Four Corners lecture series by Greg Munson. I just wanted to thank everyone for being here and to thank our friends group. Programs like this wouldn't be possible without SCCA. And I know there's those of you who are online right now, and there's those of you here in the audience, and some of you guys are already members. Please consider becoming members because you support programs like this, cultural demonstrations, learning new things, all of this knowledge and being able to connect in this community far and wide, right? We have a lot of locals joining us today, and we have people also from all over the country. So thank you. And with that, I'm going to introduce the executive director for Southwest Colorado Canyons Alliance, our friends group, Mark Lee Swanson.
Hello and welcome to all of you here in person and at home on Zoom. I really appreciate you all being here and helping to support Southwest Colorado Canyons Alliance and also the Society for Cultural Astronomy in the American Southwest. Southwest Colorado Canyons Alliance is the friends group for Canyons of the Ancients National Monument. And as such, we foster awareness and appreciation for the landscape and the cultural heritage of the monument. So we ultimately envision a diverse community that's all working together for responsible use and stewardship of the monument while still respecting the indigenous peoples of the region and their cultural heritage. So we couldn't do all of that without you, and I appreciate that so many of you here are already members, and like Amala said, if you're not, please consider it. But in addition to doing presentations like this, we also try to incorporate a lot of the indigenous tribes associated with the monument and invite them to speak about their own culture and heritage. And then we run a cultural site stewardship program where we're able to actually go out into the field and monitor about 120 sites for changes and damages over time. And we just really appreciate all of your support in helping with all of that. So without further ado, I will introduce Greg Munson with the Society for Cultural Astronomy in the American Southwest.
Hello, and thank you for the introduction, Amala and Markley. I appreciate it very much. My name is Greg Munson, and I am one of the principal founders of the Society for Cultural Astronomy in the American Southwest. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to try and help people understand how cultures, indigenous and Native American cultures, past and present, viewed the night sky, day sky, and how they incorporated it into their everyday lives. Today, I'm here to talk about our Cultural Landscape Survey program. Our Cultural Landscape Survey program is based on the idea of the extension of the site boundary. Taking the site boundary out from the usual little dotted line that goes around an archaeological site and the artifacts contained therein. And beyond that, the line is basically there's nothing out there. Well, there truly is. When you go to an archaeological site, you can see that the site normally would incorporate agricultural areas and resource procurement areas adjacent to the pueblos. We're trying to to investigate the site's relationship with other nearby villages and connection to horizon features such as peaks, valleys, all kinds of different horizon features. And this will also give us some help with the climate and astronomical connections to the sky. When we think of the site extending all the way out to the horizon and up into the sky. There are three main elements of a cultural landscape survey project as we have designed it. The first is research, design, and consultation. What kind of questions need to be asked? We are also planning a very vigorous site documentation program, and then ways of visualizing the data that we collect. What we are anticipating is working on a research design through consultation. And to do this, we need to develop our Cultural Landscapes Advisory Network, or our CLAN. This is a group of people, interested people, about the subjects of cultural astronomy and cultural landscapes, primarily composed of representatives and individuals from descendant tribal communities. These are the people we need to ask what kind of questions they want answered. Our clan would also include the academic and research institutions, University of Colorado Boulder, Crow Canyon Archaeological Center, and then we also are interested in working with landowners, managers, and stakeholders. There's also cooperating associations and nonprofit organizations such as ourselves and the Southwest Colorado Canyons Alliance that we look forward to working with. But really the base of is the avocational and professional archaeologists that are interested in these subjects. These are the people we need to bring in and engage in a discussion about cultural landscapes and the sky. What are the questions? The questions we've generally found out that need to be asked about buildings and their placement on the landscape is why are sites placed where they are on the landscape? Are communities placed in relationship to each other? Are buildings oriented to landscape features, elements of the sky, or astronomical cycles? And how are buildings designed to express their relationship with the land, the sky, and each other? One of the principal areas of investigation for us is making sure that we have a rigorous documentation program. Documentation of the sites we work in is mainly based on the initial review of archival resources. What kind of reports have been written? Photographs, manuscripts, all the records pertaining to a site. We primarily work in large sites such as the Escalante Pueblo or other sites that have been excavated, have been developed, and are open to the public. And this makes it easier for us to bring the information to the public because it's a site that's already been investigated, and we hope to bring something new out of our investigations. The kind of architectural documentation that we are focused on is wall construction patterns and recording architectural features based on the Mesa Verde Architectural Documentation Program that I worked in for about 5 years up at Mesa Verde. So it's a good program, very rigorous. But we also want to develop rigorous standardized protocols for documenting a cultural landscape. We need to record orientation and viewshed of buildings and features so that they can be added to cultural resource management forms. And the idea of getting archaeologists to look up to the horizon, look up to the sky. We are developing a form that's called a calibrated horizon profile, and that will help people understand where the peaks are in relation to solar and lunar events. And this is an established procedure. We are going to establish procedures for photogrammetric and terrain modeling. Procedures that everyday people can perform when they're in the field. One of the most important parts of our documentation program is to assist the descendant tribal communities, SCAAS members of our society, trained volunteers, in how to conduct field research and publish the results of their investigations. Our field methodologies generally are site documentation using standard equipment, measuring tapes, compasses, transits, theodolites, total station, if we have them available. We need to develop the protocols and forms for architectural and rock art archaeological sites to standardize the method, standardize the recording of data, especially how it comes to the horizon and the sky. We're also developing procedures for the photogrammetric modeling, which we'll see a little bit later, and visualization so that people can execute these procedures in the field. As I said before, one of the main forms that we're developing is what's called a calibrated horizon profile. And this is necessary for different aspects of our program. What we are doing is going out and from an established place in a archaeological site is capture azimuth and elevation readings to prominent horizon features, peaks, valleys, points in the horizon so that we can do rectified photographs, eventually for the use in astronomy software. One thing that we are trying to do most is produce a horizon profile displaying the captured data, and that's on this form here. We do a sketch of the horizon and then indicate the points on the horizon that we're measuring, give them feature numbers, feature names, and record their azimuth, true north or magnetic north, and elevation, not in feet, but in number of degrees. How far is it? Vertically, up and down. Photogrammetric modeling is one of the tools that we use, and this is one of the procedures that's really coming up in this day and age technologically. You can even do this with your phone now, your smartphone. But what we're using is terrestrial photography and drone photography, and it usually takes about 150 photographs taken at different angles, covering a feature, the building, or the landscape to produce a model. The software that we use is Agasoft by Metashape to align and process the photos into a three-dimensional model. These models can be used for displaying, for generating digital elevation models. KNZ files can be exported and imported into Google Earth. But probably one of the main functions of photogrammetric modeling is the preservation activities, recording the architecture as it stands today. So that anything ever happens to it, we have a model of it. Or if it's going to be backfilled, then we have a model of it. And so photometric modeling is a primary preservation activity these days, along with terrestrial LiDAR, better known as laser scan. Additional things we use to create a virtual landscape is LiDAR and GIS terrain models. Area LiDAR, there's pretty good coverage for the country right now. There's USGS 3-depth website has basically the data for the entire country in 1 meter resolution right now. There's different GIS applications that we use to create a virtual landscape that show the environment, the topography, and other aspects. Digital terrain model, digital elevation models are available also on USGS websites. And you can see here, these are 3 different types of digital elevation models. This is a shaded, and this is a slope, which shows the degree of slope around Escalante. And this is an aspect, which shows what direction all the parts of it face. So it gives you a better idea of the environmental context that you're working in when you're looking at an archaeological site. There are also spatial relationships of sites to each other and prominent landscape features. And for these, again, we use the ArcGIS and QGIS programs and Google Earth. Google Earth is very handy because it gives you it can take you out into the landscape and you can see how things work together. But for doing the astronomy with Google, that doesn't quite meet the need. One of the things that we're really trying to work towards is integrating all of the modeling, all of the materials into a model that we can import into various different astronomical software. The one we prefer to use right now, we're working towards is the Stellarium. It's available on the internet. And probably one of the weakest parts of Stellarium is the horizon. And that's why we're doing the calibrated horizon profiles. When we do calibrated horizon profiles, we can stitch those together and eventually import them into Stellarium to give us a reference view of the horizon that we can then take an accurate astronomical model and do it at home. The great reasons for using Stellarium and conducting virtual research is that observations can be made anytime, 24/7, 365. There is an accurate representation of the landscape that we're importing, and using things like Stellarium reduces site impacts and travel costs, and also it's very cool. But right now, that is the end goal. Right now, what we're working at is developing a documentation system that is useful to archaeologists and cultural resource managers. And then we'll take the steps up to the models, the astronomical models such as Stellarium. Our first experiment, and that's what it was, was working at Escalante Pueblo here at Canyon Ancients National Monument. Escalante Pueblo is a site that is located on top of a very prominent hill, an old hilltop up behind the Visitor Center and Museum here. And the one thing that captured me when I first went up there, probably in March of 2022, believe it or not, it had been a while, is the incredible view of the entire horizon line out at a great distance from Escalante. And that's really critically important for how the place worked. The other thing is that Escalante is located on a hilltop near one of the lowest passages between the Montezuma Valley and the Dolores River Valley. In addition, there is an archaeological site located about 1,500 meters to the east of Escalante Pueblo called the Reservoir Group, or sometimes Reservoir Village. This is a site that has a great house and great kiva. It's much larger than Escalante and had a long dating profile from about 1050 to 1120. This is important because Escalante dates from about 1120 through about 1220 in two different occupational periods. Also located over by Reservoir Village is Emerson Pueblo, which is a drywall structure. And so these two sites, Reservoir Village predated Escalante. So in essence, what it looks like is that the folks moved from Reservoir Village up to Escalante. And this is something that Mary helped us understand, and that she told us that the hilltop in Escalante was very prominent and very important prior to the structure being built up there. People were going up there and doing things before Escalante Pueblo was built. Escalante Pueblo, and I call it a great house Pueblo. It's not commonly referred to here as a great house, but I think it does have the attributes of a great house. Escalante Pueblo has many Chacoan style features, such as a kiva that is partially above ground, part below ground, kiva floor vaults, subfloor ventilator complex, and the masonry styles included in the Pueblo. From the appearance and from an analysis, it also appears to be planned public architecture. So this is features that indicate that it was probably should be included in the class of great houses. The two main occupational periods for Escalante were the Great House period, which is 1120 to about 1150, just 30 short years, and then a later Mesa Verde reoccupation period in 1180 to about 1220. The Great House itself, when we looked at the, let me go back here for a second. When we looked at the Pueblo, this is the standard map that you see published and showing two kivas, Kiva A, Kiva B, and approximately 25 rooms or so shown on the map. But when we looked at the site report indicated that the kiva out in front, Kiva B, was a Mesa Verde construction, and there was Mesa Verde occupation in the lower corner. You have to remember Escalante Pueblo is only about 35 or 40% excavated. So the only parts that are excavated are roughly the kiva and this block of rooms in the south eastern quadrant of the site itself. So if we read the report and looked at it, and we take Kiva B out of it because that's a Mesa Verde, then we begin to understand what this site may have looked like when it was first So when we look at the architecture itself, one of the most important things that we must look at is the bond and abutment patterns of the walls. That will reveal how the site was put together. And when we look at this site, we see that the central Kiva was likely built first, and because we can see all the walls that go around it were butted to it. And by the way, the map I'm using here was adapted from in Thompson's The Escalante Community. And he based his map on the original excavation. When we looked at it, there were 3 wall entries into the original site. And the site report indicates that these rooms along the bottom, you notice that they all have are butted up against this exterior wall. So these rooms were added on later, but according to the site report, they were added on shortly after the original Pueblo was built. There's these 2 long symmetrical rooms on either side of the Pueblo that show that they were subdivided. And in the site report, it shows these 2 walls between rooms 4, 5, and 6 as being drywall masonry, which is not a typical Chalkland style masonry, but it is a typical Mesa Verde style masonry. So making a few, based on the information here, that this block rooms were built later, briefly later, and that these rooms were subdivided later. On this side, we don't have as much evidence because of the excavation, but we're theorizing that this is how Escalante looked like when it was originally built. Here we have the Kiva in the center, 2 long rooms on the side, and an exterior perimeter wall with 3 wall entries, 2 on the south side, 1 on the north corner. And this is another point that Mary Wayaki helped us understand is quite often they put an entrance up in here that made you go through rooms to get into the site as a security measure, a way of controlling access to public architecture. When we did some field work in May of 2022, we began examining the architecture and the layout of Escalante Pueblo to see how it was put together. And what we found out that it does appear to exhibit some very bilateral symmetry. The measurements from the center of the Kiva out to the corners were almost exactly the same. And a line drawn down the center of the site shows that you have these 2 rooms on either side. And this is the kind of thing that we look at to convince us that this was built originally as public architecture, but there were residents that lived there too. It wasn't not lived. There were people that lived there. There are hearths that were excavated in some of the rooms over in this side over here, milling bins. Those are evidence that people were living there, but were they permanent residents? Were they caretakers? Were they travelers coming for various events? These rooms could have been built for people like that. We also looked at the outer walls and trying to look at how they were constructed. And we found that the eastern wall and the southern wall were built at a perfect 90-degree angle. So this are the kind of things that convince us that they put a lot of work into the site itself, planning the architecture. Shortly after this, they added on the south wall, maybe within about 10 years of the original construction, as indicated in the site report. But when they added on the south wall, they maintained the symmetry. They maintained the angles. They put these 2 south walls parallel to each other, which means they were adjusting the site, continuing that public architecture, but maintaining the precision with which they built the place. We then looked at how the walls related to the landscape, measuring the azimuths of the eastern and southern walls, the best ones. And we looked out and they went off. The eastern wall has an azimuth going to the north of 4 degrees and 30 seconds off of true north. So it wasn't cardinally aligned. It was moved slightly off of that. To the southwest, which is kind of unusual, because most of these sites had a southern, southeast, or southeastern orientation. And my thinking is that southeastern orientation was used to help gather the winter sun and shade from the summer sun, or some sort of reason that we're not aware of that they put it that way. But this one is put a little bit off to the southwest, which is different. These two southern walls had an azimuth of 94 degrees and 30 minutes each. So we measured those. But when we looked at the site, the primary orientation of the site is to the south. That is the view you have at the Pueblo. And that gives you a view of the Mesa Verde Escarpment and the southern sky, particularly the southern night sky. The southern night sky is very dynamic, because that is where constellations in the Milky Way move fastest across the sky. So you can see movement in the sky over the course of an evening. Whereas if you're looking to the north behind you, around the North Star, Polaris, it moves much slower. So you had a view of the stars, the planets. Plainly, the ecliptic is easily viewed in the southern night sky where the planets live. And so most sites had that southern orientation. And so that would give you a good view of the sky. The orientation on the eastern wall is to the north, and there's a single mountain along an otherwise featureless horizon, and that's Elston Mountain. Eastern wall measured 4 degrees and 30 minutes. Elston Mountain had when we recorded it, an azimuth of 7 degrees and 40 minutes, which is only about 3 degrees off. Now for Western astronomers, that's off by a mile. But what we got to think about when we look at these things is, what is the cultural relevance? How would they have seen it? Is being off by a few degrees, and it has an impact on how they think about it. The southern walls both had a bearing off to the horizon of 94 degrees and 30 minutes. And when we looked off in that direction, the first time I went up there in March of 2022, going to volunteer training for 10 inches, stood on that south wall, looked out, and I saw that south wall pointed directly at Mount Hesperus Mountain. And when we did our measurements, Hesperus had a bearing of 95 degrees. So it's only 30 seconds off on those two southern walls. And so what we're looking at is a very high degree of precision. It was very important for them to orient that southern wall on Hesperus Mountain. They were half a degree off, but believe it or not, your human eyes can only discern to about a half a degree of arc. So this is, for all intents and purposes, directly on Hesperus Mountain. And in looking off to the other direction on the southern walls, we saw Bear's Ear sitting on a relatively also featureless horizon, flat horizon in that area at a very far distance. But Bear's Ear is very difficult to see because of the atmospheric conditions. So it's got to be a pretty clear day. But when it is, it's very close. It's only about Bear's Ears was at 278 degrees. Southern walls are 274. So it's only less than 4 degrees off total. So again, for Western astronomers, that's a lot, but for these folks, probably was not. So what is the archaeological evidence for our assessment that Escalante Pueblo had this appearance in its great house occupational period? And for that, we go to the archives. And Canyon Ancients, Blythe Martison and Danny Long were very nice in helping me in getting into the archives and getting a look at the manuscript and photograph collection for Escalante and Dominguez Pueblo, succession number 7828.28. And I was able to go through it. They had the field notebooks from Alan Reed and Curtis Wright. Also a number of photographs that help us understand what the site looked like when it was excavated, not after it was stabilized and repaired. So first of all, the first first room that was excavated was this was the central Kiva A. And one thing I wanted to show everybody is something that a lot of people know about this Kiva. They see it excavated, they see the way it looks today. But as they were excavating the site, going down to this right up below the bench, the Kiva was filled in with fill. And on top of that fill was this L-shaped intrusive wall, double course masonry, old fill. And so this was on top of the fill. And this is likely a Mesa Verde construction, Mesa Verde reoccupation construction. There's also this little wing wall that came out. And this is going to be important a little later. When we're looking at these two walls that subdivided rooms 4, 5, and 6, these were listed as drywall masonry. And this is the way the wall appeared. The north wall of room 6 appeared at the time of excavation. You can see the masonry down below is not comparable to that on the sides and in the area. And this is what they called the drywall masonry. And it does appear that these stones were laid in there fairly loosely and filled in with fill as time progressed. The north wall, this other divider wall, you can see here at the excavation, is also a little bit different than the architecture on the sides, and these are butted, very clearly abutted on either side. So these two walls were put in. The question is, I don't really know when. They could have filled in these two walls when they built these walls down below the first expansion. If they were drywall, as is said in the report, then it's probably a Mesa Verde construction, Mesa Verde reoccupation construction, which is 1180 to 1220. So this is what kind of evidence we have in the archaeological record that these walls may not have been there during the original construction. This is a view of room 5. And what it shows also is this little tiny river cobble footer wall that was in the bottom of this room. And that little river cobble wall wasn't built upon. It was also a construction prior to the construction of Escalante Pueblo itself. So this is part of the evidence that shows that that hilltop was important, was used before Escalante was even built, probably during the Reservoir Village period. Over on the other side, this is our hardest walls to prove that these were, other than their abutment patterns, that they were not there during the original construction, even though, you know, it would make sense because then you would have a symmetry. These are the only photographs that exist of this wall. Unfortunately, they're after stabilization. So it shows that, again, different kind of masonry than you see around it. And the one page we found showed that it was a double course masonry wall, which is typical also a little bit later. So this is the only evidence I could find that these walls didn't exist, but in the initial construction. But then again, it would also make sense to maintain the symmetry in the site. The other big question we had is, are the exterior walls as straight and carefully built as we see them today? Because if we're depending on them to be aligned to horizon features, we need to make sure that they weren't stabilized into that straightness. And here we have the exterior room 6 in the east. This is the eastern wall. And you can see the masonry is very well done. It's all very nice and straight. Typically, these walls, when they were excavated, they did have some lean or some flaps, usually leaning over. And the excavators would go down to the bottom of the wall and then build it up back from there and straighten it up. But the wall bases have always been straight. So they were that line was maintained when the stabilization was done. The Escalante Pueblo, this is how we think this is how the eastern wall appeared after it was finished being excavated, showing how nice and straight that wall is, and that's this eastern wall here. And the eastern wall has a view out to Elston Mountain. As you can see, Elston Mountain has, it's not a perfect line, but Elston Mountain is the only feature on the horizon in that direction. And Elston Mountain actually has the mountain and a valley next to it. So you have positive and negative space being looked at. The southern walls are also not as much photographs or documentation showing us, but this is room 11, which is down the southwest corner. You can see this western wall is nice and straight. You can see this southern wall is, during excavation, fairly straight also. As you can see here, a little bit of lean that they straightened up, but the wall bases are nice and straight. One thing I liked when I saw this photograph is if you follow the line out, you end up at Hesperus Mountain. It's probably the southwest corner. So this is the line that goes off to Hesperus. It shows how very carefully the wall was built, very clean, straight corners. And so we think we have sufficient evidence from the archaeological record to show that these walls were as straight and carefully built as we think they were. And so when this is the view I had in the first time I went up to Escalante, and this is what I would say it was almost a blast of knowledge, where when I came, I looked at it and saw that it lying straight up onto Hesperus Mountain. Well, I guess we have to look at what is the importance of that. Using Google Earth, we can confirm these kinds of alignments, even though Google Earth, because of the error, the spherical error it has built into it, the lines you extend from a site do not go to the exact point you think, do not visually go to the points that you think they do. So this is the relationship of Escalante to the horizon off to the west, or off to the east, off to Hesperus Mountain. One of the things we've captured on these our calibrated horizon profile forms is the azimuth and elevation to many of the peaks on the La Plata Mountains, with Hesperus being centered here, Shark's Tooth, and then we also mark due east for what we would call equinox. And the point on the horizon is due east, it's kind of flat, not much there. And then going off to the north, your summer solstice sunrise would be off on this end, and your winter solstice sunrise would be down off this end. But for this purpose, we're looking at Hesperus Mountain and its relationship to the point of equinox. And to talking about equinox, we have to start talking about what is equinox. Equinox, to most of us, is a specific day and time. Time when the Earth travels around the sun and goes to its midpoint. So the equal points of light and day. To the Puebloans, was the exact date, time, and moment of equinox culturally important? Probably not. Equinox is not necessarily a day and time. It's a time of transition. It's a period of time. So when we looked at Hesperus, if they were orienting that wall directly on the peak of Hesperus, if they were interested in equinox, why didn't they orient it to the point of equinox? Well, the point of equinox from Escalante is a relatively flat, featureless part of the horizon. Now, the sun at equinox time, at the time of equinox, a couple of weeks before, a couple of weeks after, is moving very rapidly along the horizon. It's kind of a bell-shaped curve, the speed of the sun. The speed of the sun moving around the horizon is highest at the time of equinox. In fact, the sun moves approximately 0.9 solar diameters a day at that time period. So it's moving almost 1 solar width a day at the time of equinox. The width of the sun is about half a degree of arc. So when we looked at the relationship of Hesperus Mountain to the point on the horizon of equinox, we find about a 5-degree difference. That's a pretty big difference. But what it does, or what it equates out to at that time, is a 10-day difference. It's about 10 days from the time it comes to equinox to the time it crosses over the top of Hesperus. And from when the sun is traveling in that direction, going to the north, it's 10 days from the time it crosses over Hesperus till the time it reaches the point of equinox. A 10-day anticipation time is actually fairly important, because that gives you a method of saying we know when equinox will be, because the sun is crossing over Hesperus at that time. But I think what's more important here is the movement of the sun over Hesperus, going to the north and to the south. Yes, it's about 10 days up, but what that generates is a seasonal social organization, possibly. What we're looking at is that the time that it passed over Hesperus is the time that societies change their social responsibilities. And among the southeastern Pueblos, we're looking at the time of, the summer people and the winter people. And what we found is the summer societies, in some cases, are actually in charge a little bit longer than the winter societies. So this would actually create a calendar that would generate that. So what we found out in our look at Escalante Pueblo was that Escalante Great House Pueblo was constructed at the location and oriented to the landscape for a specific purpose. The Great House occupational phase exhibits geometrical and symmetrical architectural construction characteristics indicating planned public architecture and seasonal social organization. The landscape orientations tied to the building into a sacred landscape, looking at the thoughts of word quarter shrines that Bernhard and Ortman looked at in terms of Jackson Castle out on the monument, and possibly a shared cognitive map of the landscape as proposed by Bernardini and People. The south walls of the Pueblo are purposely oriented to Hesperus Mountain, which is a sacred mountain to the descending communities today, both Pueblo and Dene. And the sun rises over Hesperus Mountain at or near the time of the middle sun. A better time, rather a better word than equinox for us to use, the time of the middle sun. And this represents a time to change the seasonal social responsibilities. And this is explained in Ortiz. This is what we kind of came to a conclusion with this cultural landscape survey. But one of the other things is, how do we visualize the cultural landscape? And this gets into the more fun stuff. We use photogrammetric models to visualize this landscape. We use dynamic panoramas, and we use Google Earth. This is where we're going to find out if we crash the internet here. Okay, so a few more minutes. Okay, Escalante Pueblo is a really nice Pueblo. This should take just a few moments to come up. Well, this is the model. We're not using the internet yet. It opened. So what we're able to do is construct these models so we can actually incorporate the terrain around the site. And then we can begin to understand the site and how it relates to the landscape. Escalante Pueblo has this Kiva, and we did a much more detailed model of that. And this is the model of the Kiva Escalante. So it might take a few more moments to come up. And you can see that this needs a lot of cleanup, but this is a good way for people to interact with things like this in a virtual environment. You can see incredible detail in the walls. It's all photo accurate, textured, and we can actually take detailed measurements from these models using the proper software. So again, one of the primary reasons for doing these models is preservation. The other site that we investigated recently, this last May, was Wallace Great House Pueblo, owned by Bruce and Cindy Bradley, with us today. And wanted to show a little bit about what we did out at their site briefly. I won't presume to talk too much about Wallace, other than it does have a contemporaneous occupational period with Escalante. And there's some features at Wallace that relate to Escalante. One of the first things we did is, one of the things with our drone, we're able to put together what's called what I call a dynamic panorama. Now we're going to find out if the internet works. So far, so good. What these dynamic panoramas do for us is give us a way to interact and see how people may have related to the horizon, see what they saw. This is a view from approximately where the roof levels of Wallace Pueblo are. And you can see you have a very good view of the Mesa Verde Escarpment, and you can pan around, taking a good look around the Mesa Verde Escarpment at different scales, up to Little Plata Mountains. But probably the most interesting thing is you can see directly below too. So, and when we do these panoramas at various different elevations above the Pueblo, you begin to understand how the landscape fits in with the site itself. Probably one of the most incredible features at Wallace is a masonry staircase. This is the only one I have seen. I think, Bruce, you said there was one at Pueblo del Arroyo, is that right? There's also one at Pueblo del Arroyo. I've seen lots of steps, stone steps, things like that, but this is very different in that we can take a look at the site. Again, what we have is a long room that was subdivided by a wall, and then the staircase itself. And you can see this is actually built up masonry in the staircase. And you can see from this photograph that the detail that we have captured. We can do elevation profiles, we can export profiles, so wall elevations, drawings, all the kinds of things that are going to be needed for cultural preservation activities. This staircase is, like I said, very unique, and it leads from these rooms here. You go up the staircase, out on the staircase, and it leads up to the roof of the adjoining Kiva. And this is the Kiva at Escalante, or I'm sorry, at Wallace. And this Kiva, when it comes up, you'll see is about the same. When we were out there this spring, was at the same point in its excavation as this one does take a little bit longer. is at the same point as Escalante was when they first excavated it. You'll see that the site has been excavated down to just, I'm sure it's down lower than this now, but at the time we looked at it, it was right about the bench. And in this kiva, yeah, we had right on top of this fill layer again, this wing wall that was coming out and formed an L-shaped wall on top of this fill. If I've got this right, Bruce. Okay. So this is a shared trait with Escalante, is that they had this later L-shaped wall built on top of the fill up to the bench level. Probably, I think Bruce termed this to be the world's largest niche in the kiva. But the other interesting feature of this kiva is there does not seem to be, if I'm, correct me anytime, Bruce, if I'm getting this wrong, but does not seem to be very much evidence of pilasters around the bench. And the upper wall actually curves inwards. And this is unusual. Most of the walls above kivas around here go straight up. This one domes in a little bit. Or did they put a flat roof on top of the kiva and not use pilasters? Something Bruce is looking into. Could the doming of the roof be a representation of the dome of the sky? These kinds of things. So these are the kind of things we're looking at Escalante. We're just really starting our investigations there. But the one thing I also wanted to demonstrate a little bit before we go today is about how we can use Google Earth to visualize a lot of the material that we're working with. See how fast this loads up. This may be a little more complicated. Huh. So when we look at Google Earth, we can place points on the horizon, important points, Bears Ears, Hesperus Mountain, Elston Mountain, other sites that are important to see the context and relationship with, Wallace Pueblo, Lowry Pueblo. We think we've established that there is a direct sight line between Escalante and Lowry. And you can see the line between Hesperus and Bears Ears and Escalante is almost, it's very carefully placed on the landscape. One thing we can do is go into a site and get a bit better view of how it relates to the horizon. So this gives us a way of visualizing, and we can incorporate our models into this program. It gives us a better understanding of how the site relates to the environment, the landscape, other sites, and all ways of visualizing it that's accessible to people. So one of the things we must ask ourselves in conclusion is, what is our purpose in doing this type of research? Recent talk about by Scott Artman on Zoom, learned a lot. Reflected a lot of the thoughts that we've had and some of our consultants have shared with us. Scott indicated that reconstructing the past is not a sufficient reason to do archaeology today. We must make it apply to people living today. And the research must benefit the tribes we study. These are their questions. What do they want to know? And how can the work we do benefit them? We must harness the wisdom of the ancestors to encourage the world we want to live in today. We must look at these sites not as abandoned, but as living places. Places that can teach us things that we need to know. Archaeology is good at assisting in the transfer of knowledge and to help us tell inspiring stories. And it's important to have an understanding of the cultural landscape of the past to help us find our own place in the land and to live with each other in an ever-changing climate. These are the reasons we do cultural landscape work and why we're doing this today. How can you help, you might ask? We have SCAAS memberships. Go to our website, scaas.org/join for memberships. We have associate, student, sustaining memberships. You get a quarterly newsletter, access to journal club papers. We have a monthly journal club. Tonight we're substituting this for our journal club. And discounts to conferences and workshops. We are always ready and willing to accept your donations, cash, check, or any other means. And we also would looking for people to join our community because we do need help with grant applications and fundraising. So some additional references I put in the program. Ortiz's book, Bernhardt and Ortman's article in our 2011 conference publication, and Bernardini and People's paper in American Antiquity. I want to thank Canadian Ancients National Monument, the monument manager, Ray O'Neill, Vince McMillan, the monument archaeologist, Amala Posey Monk, our supervisory park ranger that helped us put all this together today, Southwest Colorado Canyons Alliance, Mark Swanson, executive director, and our field crew, myself, Rick Alling, Chris Dombrowski, Ray Williamson, Dude Valentine, Mary Wiaki, and Lawrence Katernick. Thanks. We'd like to thank the donors to our Carol Ann Brewster Memorial Fund and people that donated in the memory of Bernard Bell for their support for our Cultural Landscape Survey program. More information about the Society and program memberships, you can contact me or go to our website. Thank you. Appreciate your time. Happy to answer any questions you may have. One?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Well, instead of Elston Mountain as what they were looking at, villages like at House Creek and Bee Village are down in the valley. Did you ever, or did we see references of certain other sites of Meridians?
Yes, the reason we go out to the horizon is because I understand what you're saying. Yeah, we have to incorporate a lot more of the local sites. Look at them, look at the relationship of the context of the sites also. But when we go out to the horizon, Pueblo and horizon calendars are generally out at the far horizon. The horizon, the distant horizon, is the interface between the land, that which we know, and the sky, that which we don't. And there's pretty good evidence, at least in Tewa societies, that they will go reach out to points on the distant horizon and grab those points, especially peaks, mountains. Hesperus Mountain, like I said, is an important mountain today among Pueblo and Dene peoples and other Native American peoples. So this may be, we think, the origins. It could be the origins that Hesperus Mountain became sacred at the time of Escalante, and they took that with them, especially down to the southeastern Pueblos. So this may be the origin of that. And predominantly, horizon calendars, solar horizon calendars are done at the very far distant horizon. So that's why we look at them going out mountains, especially when you're seeing a wall going to a point where it's otherwise a flat horizon. There's that one peak and it's pretty close. It's probable that they were incorporating. All right, any questions from our viewers at home? The recording will be available as soon as Mark Lee and I work it out, and we will get it up onto our, I should have put that on the screen right here. We have a YouTube channel. Its YouTube channel is SCAAS, SCAAS connects to, as in the number 2, you. So SCAAS CONNECTS #2 U is our YouTube channel, and that YouTube channel has an amazing amount of videos from our past journal clubs, and also instructional videos, links to other videos, and also a lot of videos from our traditional knowledge conference that we held in 2019 in the Native American Cultural Center at Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff. So you'll be out there, a lot of good videos there.
The letter U or Y-U?
U, the letter U.
Rick, can you tell everyone about the special event that you're helping to put on
Oh,
next month?
Yes, there is another event that we're putting on, our second annual Star Party here at Canyons Ancients National Monument. We're going to be hosting the one of the hosts of the party again. This year, we're going to have Bertram Sabadawa, consultant and tour guide, come and talk to us. And we're going to have Mary Wiyaki from Santa Clara Pueblo come back and talk to us some more. And then Rick Alling is going to bring up a few telescopes from the Arizona State University, hopefully a sound system again. And we're going to spend an evening under the stars on September 15th here at the Canyon Ancients Visitor Center Museum. Program will begin about 6:30, getting warmed up, and then we'll have our first presenter on at 7. So please join us.